It's summertime hosting and we are making all of the summer pies. One of them being the slab pie, which, have you ever made a slab pie? You use your big baking sheet. This right here is a galette. I'll show you how to do that in a different video. And unfortunately, I didn't get a big video of this before we ate it all. This is the last piece. And that's proof that it's amazing. It's basically like a big fancy Pop-Tart and everyone wants to eat this last piece for breakfast. So I'm doing the video quick so they can enjoy it. But here's how you make the slab pie, the pie dough, all of it. It's super easy. You're gonna love it. Let's go bake together. My secret weapon for making the best pie dough, honestly, it is foolproof, is to use a food processor. And here's a little trick. If you have not used a food processor before, the first thing that you need to do is actually click the base of it in place. And typically you start off to the right and then you like swing it over and it clicks into place. Then do not forget to put the blade in. Oh my, I have done it before, got all the ingredients in there and realized the blade was not in. You cannot get the blade in once the ingredients are in. You have to dump everything out, start over. So click the base in, get your blade in, and then we start adding the flour. And it's 3 cups of flour. I like to hold my hand over the top of the blade where it slides down onto the post, because at least on my food processor, when I don't hold it over there, I feel like flour gets down in there. But that's just on mine. You check yours out. So add your flour in, then you're gonna do a teaspoon of salt. Do not forget the salt. Without salt, the pie crust is flavorless. I've accidentally done that before too. Oops, forgot the salt, and crazy how much 1 teaspoon of salt helps give it so much flavor. Then what we're going to do is, especially when I'm doing a sweet pie, is we add in the sugar, and it's just a tablespoon of sugar. It's not a whole lot, but it helps the pie crust to have just a little hint of sweetness. We don't want it to be uber sweet because the pie filling is very sweet. Then click on your top. Your food processor will not turn on if your top is not clicked on. So these are all tips. If you've not used a food processor before, that's the way to get it to work, is click the bottom, get your blade in there, put your ingredients, click the top on. And I like to run it maybe for 30 seconds just to get the salt, sugar, and flour all incorporated. Then here comes the butter. And for this recipe, you're gonna do 3/4 a cup of butter. And here in America, that is 1.5 sticks or 12 tablespoons. And what I do is I cut it in half, the stick in half, and then I cut it in half again, and then I cut it into little chunks. You don't want your butter to be warm and soft. You want it to be really firm and hard, but it's easier for the food processor to get that butter cut into the flour if you don't put just one huge chunk in. So make sure that you cut it up into smaller pieces. This is where the food processor makes making pie dough so easy, because it is going to cut the butter into this flour way easier, much faster than if I was trying to do it by hand. Now you can, of course, do it by hand, get a pastry blender, you can do it, but food processor, honestly, I've never had a batch of pie dough not turn out when we use the food processor. Then the other thing is, I've also tried to do a pure butter pie crust, and just a little bit of Crisco or shortening goes a long way. And so there's actually 6 tablespoons of shortening in this recipe. It's mostly butter, just a little bit of shortening, but it really does make it flakier. It changes the texture of the pie dough. Now, if you have found a recipe or a way to sub out the shortening, put a comment below. I would be happy to try it. I just always compare it back to this most amazing never fails pie crust recipe. The full recipe is down in the description below, and it's actually on our blog as well. So if you click over onto the blog, you can print the whole thing out. Makes it a little bit easier to follow the recipe while we're baking together. So click on over to the blog. You can cook with me and bake with me once you've printed out the recipe. Once you have all the butter and the shortening in, you're going to click your top back on. And for this part, you don't want to walk away from the food processor because the goal is really that we just get that butter and shortening cut into the flour. So I like to stand and actually watch it. It doesn't take very long, and I'll put it on low and allow that flour, Crisco, and butter to get, it's essentially cutting the butter and shortening into the flour. And I just run the food processor, and this is going real time. This is exactly how long I do it. I do it until the flour starts to look just a little bit like it's sticking to the side. See how when I shake it, it kind of just stays up on the side? That's what it looks like. It doesn't look super wet at this point because we haven't added the water, but that butter and that shortening are now cut into the flour, which is perfect. You don't want to have huge chunks of butter or shortening in the flour because when you go to roll out the pie dough, if there's a big chunk of butter, it melts really weird and it will actually make your pie crust have like holes in it. Now we have our 1/2 cup of cold water, and I just slowly drizzle it in while the food processor is running. You're just going to slowly add it in until the dough comes together. And it always takes a 1/2 cup. Every once in a while, I have to add like maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon more to get it to come together. See how I added just that last little bit? You're gonna run your food processor until the dough is all clumped together on one side. You don't wanna keep going once it all gets clumped together because what it will do is it will actually start to melt that butter. And we don't want the butter completely melted through there. We want it to look like this, where it's all in one chunk over to one side. And I let this run. This is real time. How long it took me, it only takes maybe 20 to 30 seconds at the most. Then you can't skip this step, okay? You have to chill your pie dough. So here's what I do. If I know we are going to want to make pie at some point this week, it's kind of like when I do sourdough, is I just get the pie dough ready ahead of time. If I have time on Monday or Tuesday, I'll make it then. Wednesday, whenever. You can make it ahead of time. It can rest in your fridge for days upon days. You can also freeze the pie dough. So this recipe is actually going to make enough for one large slab pie, which is a double crust, plus a mini galette, or it makes enough for 2 double crust 9-inch or 8-inch pies. So all this to say, this is making a lot of pie dough. You may think, oh my goodness, I only really want 1 shell because I'm gonna make strawberry pie. Great, make the entire recipe and then freeze chunks of it, and you'll be able to just pull it out of your freezer and make pie so easy. And let me tell you, this pie crust is way better than any store-bought pie crust. It honestly, store-bought pie crust just doesn't even compare to it, but you need to chill it. Okay, that's the moral of this story. You can't skip this step. So make it ahead of time, get it ready so that you can make an easy pie the day that you want to have it, because pie really does taste the best if it's made fresh the day you're going to enjoy it. Now, sometimes when I take the dough out of the food processor, there's a few parts that are like still a little bit crumbly or just a little dusty. It's okay for you to work with it and get it to all like stick together. You're not gonna mess your pie dough up at this point by working with it because you're not adding more flour in. When people say don't overwork your pie crust, what is happening usually is that people are putting too much flour down on their work surface. And so then their pie crust is getting more and more flour incorporated into it as they work with it, which ends up making your pie crust tough. Right now, it's not a problem for us to work with it and make sure that it's all incorporated together. Now, since I am going to make a big slab pie, I'm not portioning out this pie crust. Instead, I'm just gonna chill it in one big chunk because I know I'm gonna take it all out. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe the next day is when I'm gonna make the slab pie, but it's fine for it to all sit together if you know I'm gonna use all of it when I take it out of the fridge. Now let's say you didn't make your pie crust ahead of time. That's okay. Pop it into the fridge and let it chill for at least an hour, and then go ahead, pull out our cookbook. This is actually a recipe from our cookbook, but I'm sharing it on the blog, and you get to have a little sneak peek at all of the goodness that is in our book. Our cookbook tells the story of how we started filling our table to fight for freedom. We started hosting what we now call the Freedom Dinners, which raise funds to fight human trafficking, and those dinners have just grown and grown. They are the most beautiful community dinners. The cookbook tells the story of that, but it also gives you 6 of our menus. So, okay, that's enough of the cookbook promo. The link to it is below if you want to check out more on that. What we're doing right now is a little different than what is in the cookbook. We are going to do a mix of blueberries and plums. And these plums, the reason they look all frosty is because they're actually the plums from our Italian plum trees, and we froze them last year. We just cut them in half, take the pit out, freeze them on big cookie sheets, and then once they are frozen, we pop them into the big freezer bags, and then we can pull them out anytime we want all throughout the year and make pie and crumble and all sorts of deliciousness. So what you need is, let's see, I don't think that it showed all of the cups of fruit that I put in here, but you are going to use 5 to 6 cups of fruit, depending on how big you make your slab pie. So I like to start with 5 cups of fruit. So I put 3 cups of blueberries in there. I put the cup of sugar in, and then we are actually going to chunk up the plums. You don't want to have big, huge pieces of fruit in there because a slab pie is kind of like a really fancy Pop-Tart. You want it to have smaller pieces of the fruit in there. So if you think about the size of a big blueberry, that's a great size for the fruit. You can throw the blueberries in there whole. And then I just go through with the plums, cut them up so that they're about, a 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch size. I like to get all of the fruit chopped up, mixed up with the sugar, and then we're also going to put some cornstarch in here, a little bit of salt. I like to get it all mixed up so that the fruit, especially if it is frozen fruit, has time to rest with that sugar and cornstarch so that all of the juices start to come out. Now, if you're using fresh fruit, it doesn't take very long for the juices to start to mingle with the sugar and the cornstarch. But I like to get it done before I ever start working with the pie dough, like rolling it out and getting it into the pan, because then the fruit has time to rest together. It gets a little bit juicy. That cornstarch can get mixed in with all of that goodness. And then it's ready for us to pour into the middle of our pie dough. When your fruit is frozen, you'll notice when you first start to mix all of it up together that the sugar doesn't really want to stick to it, and it looks like there's a lot of sugar and cornstarch in the bottom of the bowl. Don't worry. Once you let the fruit sit together with all of that, it will get juicy and incorporated, and it makes for the yummiest filling in the pie. You don't want to scrimp, especially on the cornstarch, because that is what helps it to actually set up. And I like using cornstarch because it does just a little bit better job and it doesn't give it a floury taste. One of the reasons that I love to do the slab pies, especially in the summertime, is number one, it's super easy. It can be rustic, it can be any shape you want it to be, and it's really easy once it sets up, to cut it and serve it. It's like having a hand pie. It's not all like sloppy and soupy. You can literally walk around with it if you wanted to. So it makes it really fun, especially when we're doing backyard barbecues or hangouts, that we can just cut the pie. People can walk on by and grab a piece whenever they're ready. So now our pie dough has chilled. I had it in the fridge for a couple of days, but at least an hour, and now we're gonna work on rolling it out to put it into our pan. For the slab pie, I use a large baking sheet. This is a standard size. It is, I think, 11 by 16. That's what we want to roll our pie crust out to fit into. So I usually put it out on the counter so I can see it again, so that I can see how big am I wanting to roll out this pie dough. I unwrap it from the cellophane, and then we're going to cut the pie dough in half. This is the whole recipe of the pie dough. So you need all of it in order to make a slab pie that's going to fill your entire baking sheet. And so I do just a simple cut it in half. You don't have to be exact. It's going to have some extra pie dough towards the end when we cut off to make the crust. But I like to use the biggest piece is actually going to be on the bottom. So if you look at them and you're like, okay, this one feels a little bit bigger, that's the one that we're going to work with first, because it is going to be the bottom of this slab pie. Then we want to make sure that we have floured our work surface. Now, this is the point with the pie dough, that we don't want to be adding loads of extra flour, and we don't want to have to roll it out, re-roll it out, re-roll it out. We want to do it one time. So I make sure that there is a good amount of flour down on the counter, because if your pie dough sticks to the counter, it rips it, it causes problems, and that is when people end up having to re-roll it out, which then makes it tough. So when you take your pie dough out of the fridge, sometimes I need to let it rest on the counter for just a little bit so that I can actually work with it. Once you can easily squeeze the pie dough, but it still feels cold, that's when you want to work with it. You don't want it to get really warm and really soft and squishy, because that basically does away with everything that we just did by letting it chill. But we do want to make sure that there is ample flour on the counter, and then I put a little bit of flour on the top of the pie crust as well, or the pie dough, so that it doesn't stick to our rolling pin. Now, because we're making this as a slab pie, we are going to roll this out into a huge rectangle. So just work with it. Go slow. You'll see it wants to start cracking in the middle, and I try to get it to stay together, but it doesn't want to. It's fine. If yours is cracking just a little bit in some spots, it's okay. We will be able to seal that back together when we get it into our pan. And because this is the bottom of the pie crust, I'm not as concerned with it looking perfect, because nobody's going to see it. It's just holding all of the goodness. Now, when you are rolling out the pie dough, you want to make sure that you check over and over again that you can move it, that it's not sticking to the counter. And so that's when I pick it up, shift it over, make sure that, do you need to push some of that flour under there? That's how you ensure that you're not having to work with it too much, which ends up causing it to be tough. So make sure that there's a little flour on top. See, it was sticking to my rolling pin. That tells me we need just a little bit more flour on top. And then if it doesn't move, you want to add more flour under it. So I'm constantly shifting it around, working it together, trying to get that seam to stay together, but I'm not super concerned about it because we're going to put it into our pan. You need a large work area to do a slab pie because your baking sheet is really big. Now, here's the cool thing. You can make a slab pie any size you want. If you have a smaller baking sheet or you're not serving as many people, cut your pie dough in half, freeze the other half, and make a mini slab pie. So you can make this any size you want, but if you're filling one of those big baking sheets, make sure that you give yourself a lot of space to work with. My goal is to get it so that it is about 1/4 of an inch in thickness, maybe a little bit less, and then I'll hold the pan over it to see, okay, do I need to keep going? You don't want the pie crust to be too much thicker than about 1/4 of an inch because it just has a little bit harder time getting really flaky. And you're not trying to have this really thick crust, especially on a slab pie, because you have a top and a bottom crust with a very small amount of filling. And so we want those ratios to be right. We don't want it to be this really thick crust. Once I have the crust completely rolled out, it's to the size I want, and it has a really even thickness, then I just gently roll it up over my rolling pin. Oh, I'm making pie, Erin's making pancakes, and at some point soon, we're going to show you how to make these pancakes. You can do them with sourdough discard, but you can also just do them the original recipe. They're amazing both ways. But now that our pie crust is flopped over our rolling pin, I gently pick the rolling pin up and shift it onto my baking sheet. Now you'll see I don't have any parchment on the baking sheet. I didn't spray it with any oil because you don't need to. Your pie crust has plenty of butter and shortening in it. It's not going to stick to your pan. If you are concerned about it sticking to your pan though, put a piece of parchment paper down. That's the best way to do it. You don't want to do any oil. That will change the way that the pie crust bakes. And as you can see, that split still wanted to stay there in the bottom of the pie crust. And I just use my fingers to push that seam together. Now, the edges of the pie crust are a little bit too big. So I just go around and I cut it so that it doesn't go up any further than maybe halfway up the sides of the pan. The reason why you don't want to have tons of extra pie crust up there is because when we go to fold the edges together, when you have too much pie crust, it makes that crust not cook very well. It'll be doughy still inside. Now, this is going to be delicious on the sides because it's going to have plenty because we're going to put a top crust on, but we don't want it to be so big that it is like thick and gummy. So trim the sides. We're going to set this pan to the side. And now we're going to get our top rolled out. The reason I like to start with the bottom, well, is yes, you need to put it down first, but it's really good to work with the bottom first because then by the time you come and you're working with the top, it's a little bit softer, a little bit easier to work with, and just think of the bottom as practice. Now for the top, we do want this to look really nice because this is the top of your pie, but it's the same action that you did with the bottom. You want to make sure you have a good amount of flour down on your work surface. I begin to squish this out. My dough is still pretty cold from being in the fridge, but I begin to kind of get it squished out so that it doesn't crack and start to want to go in the wrong direction, because the same thing with this. We are wanting this to be a big rectangle. It needs to cover the entire pie, and we need to have extra so that we can crimp the crust and keep all of our filling inside. So you can use your hands to get it going in the right direction, especially if it wants to crack like that. That's when I just use the warmth of my hands to get it to all work together a little bit better. If you're new to working with a rolling pin, maybe this is one of the first pies you've made, I'm so glad we get to bake together. Slab pies are amazing, and also I'm going to be sharing the recipe for how to make a galette, which sounds very, very fancy, but a galette is actually the absolute easiest pie you could ever make. It can be any shape you want. It's supposed to be rustic. You only have to make one layer of crust. So stick around. I'll be sharing that recipe soon. And so look into our Cooking Class with Kelly playlist. That's where you will find it. Make sure that you subscribe because then you're the first to know whenever we post anything new. We love sharing the recipes of what we are filling our table with because we have found such joy in filling our table, not just with good food, but when you fill your table with good food, people want to be there too. It's like a magnet. And it is so fun to be able to create these recipes and then share them with people. And that's our hope for you, is that we get to inspire you to fill your table, share the goodness, which really allows you to share life together. And that, my friend, is the secret to all the beauty in life, is getting to share it with people. So, okay, we have our top pie crust all laid out, and you can see I'm checking it, making sure that it can move because I need it to be just a little bit bigger, but I am working slowly because I don't want it to rip at this point, and I also don't want it to stick to the counter. When you're working with your rolling pin, you really want the rolling pin, the weight of it and it rolling, to be the thing that is pushing your pie crust out. You don't want to be pushing down on the rolling pin. It's more the action of it rolling that is squishing that pie dough out. Now we have our top crust flipped over our rolling pin, so it's ready for us to transfer it. I give the fruit another stir. Because this was all frozen fruit, I think I could have let it sit out even longer. It just was not juicing very fast to incorporate with that sugar. When I use fresh fruit, it doesn't do this. But don't worry, it's not too much sugar and cornstarch. It is all going to bubble and cook together. So I give it a good stir, and then we essentially are just going to spread this out on the bottom crust. Now, the nice thing about this not being uber juicy right now is we don't have to worry about it leaking off of that bottom crust before we get the top one on. So my goal with this, and this is why I say sometimes I add more fruit, my goal is that the fruit be one flat layer. You don't want it to be really mounded. This isn't the type of pie where we want this big mounded layer of fruit. We really want it that, think about if it was just blueberries, you don't want the blueberries stacked on top of each other. If you've chopped up plums or you've done peaches or raspberries, you want just one layer of that fruit. And you want it to cover the entire pan with about an inch and a half of a border around it. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to work my way around the pan. And as I started working my way around, I realized, I still need a little bit more fruit. And this is where that whole thing comes into play, that you can make this any size you want. The bigger it is, though, you're going to just need more fruit. So as I was working my way around, I decided I'm going to add more blueberries. It's okay to add more fruit at this time. Don't worry that it isn't like fully mixed in and incorporated with that sugar and cornstarch, but don't put it all in one area. I took the blueberries and I'm just scattering them around so that they will get mixed in with that sugar and cornstarch and salt, but it needed just a few more berries to really fill in the whole middle part of our pie. Once you have your fruit filling down on your pie crust, then you're going to gently roll the top of your slab pie over all of that delicious fruit. And use your rolling pin. It is a really great tool to help you transfer that pie crust. Now you can see that I did a good job getting this top sheet really big so that it covers the whole pan, but it's too big. If we try to make our crust with that much overhang, your crust is going to be very, very thick and it's not going to cook fast enough. Like the middle of your pie is going to be burned before your crust ever got done. So work your way around the pan, cut off the excess so that it's basically meeting up with the bottom crust. Now, the other thing, and you'll see as we work our way around to pinch the crust, the edges right on the corners, there's a little bit too much. You can see where it's very flat, where there's no fruit there. I could have put more fruit in and made this even bigger, but I didn't, and that's okay because I'm actually going to use all of this extra pie dough to make a little galette. So I'm going to work my way around first. This isn't when you're trying to make it cute and pretty. You're just going around, you're taking that top layer of the pie crust and you're folding it over the bottom crust, and anywhere where there is more than about 1.5 inches of pie dough where it's flat, there's no fruit tucked in there, I'm cutting that off as well so that we don't have too much crust where it doesn't cook well. And it's okay. We're going to use this extra dough. We're going to make a little galette with it. And we'll show you how to do that later. But work your way around, folding that top part over the bottom part, and don't worry about it looking cute right now. We're just trying to make sure that all of the goodness that is inside is sealed in there, that it doesn't come leaking out. If it begins to leak out, that's when your pie will stick to the pan and it can burn, and it really it just doesn't look as nice. Still delicious, but it just gets a little bit messy. So make sure all of those seams are basically closed. Once we have all of the seams closed, then we go around, and what we're going to do is pinch it. We're going to hold our fingers together where they're next to each other, and then you're going to pinch the crust together. And I'm going to work my way around, pinching it in between my fingers, and it makes that little ruffle edge. Now, there's lots of different ways to make this ruffle edge, but the main thing is you just want to be consistent. So however it's easiest for you to pinch and push the crust together, do that. If you do that same pinch all the way around, you're going to end up with a really beautiful ruffled edge. It's all about consistency. The more that you are consistent with how you pinch it and squeeze it together, then it all looks like it flows together. And I just work my way all the way around. I like to spin the pan around because it's easier to work with it when it is up top than when it starts to get down on the bottom. And sometimes I have to go around again on a couple spots to get it to even out and to look consistent. Once the ruffle edge is all done and we have all that goodness sealed in, we need to go and use a very sharp knife, and we essentially are going to do a pattern of vents. And the reason why you need to do some kind of hole, you can do any pattern you want. I did just a really simple little leaf pattern. You could do a starburst, you could do lines, but the reason why you want the vents is because we want the moisture that is inside to be able to escape. That's how the middle, all that filling gets even thicker and creamier, is that the moisture from the fruit is able to escape out of these little vents, and it also helps your pie not to have really huge bubbles in one area and then it's flat in the other. So work your way around. They don't need to connect, but you do need to have multiple ones all over the slab pie. Then the last thing we're going to do before we pop this in the oven is we're going to do an egg and cream wash. So you put 1 egg in a bowl and you mix in about a tablespoon of half and half or cream. Mix it together, whisk it together really, really good until when you pull your fork up out of there, it's almost like water running off your fork. You don't want to have big globs of egg white or yolk. You want it to be really, really mixed together where it's watery, and then we are going to brush this over the entire top of the crust. This doesn't necessarily change the flavor of your crust. It gives it a little bit of added richness, but what this does is it actually allows your crust to brown up beautifully. If you do not do an egg wash on your crust will actually start to burn before it ever gets that toasty golden brown color. When you see a pie that has a toasted golden color on the top, it is because they did an egg wash. So work your way over the whole pan, because you want it to be even. You don't want to have like a part that looks like there's a lot sitting in like a valley on the pie crust. You want it to be very even. And down below, I'm putting the links to all the tools I love. I love these silicone brushes because the ones that have the actual like hair brushes, the little hairs end up coming out after a while, especially if you put it in your dishwasher. And then you get those little hairs stuck on the top of your pie, which is so gross. I feel like they're very hard to clean. These silicone ones are my favorite just because we can throw it into the dishwasher. They're very, very easy to wash. But I work my way around the entire top of the pie. And I even go around the crust, making sure that the crust is very evenly brushed with that egg wash, because you're going to see when we pull this out of the oven, it literally makes it so beautiful. Now our oven is all heated up to 375, and we're going to pop this in there, and it takes about 40 to 50 minutes. The bigger that your slab pie is, the longer it will take. So if you're doing a smaller one, they will cook in like 30 minutes. You'll know when it's done because the crust will be very golden. Ready to see it? Look at how pretty it is. And honestly, it tastes as delicious as it looks. But now we're going to allow it to cool completely before we do the last final little drizzle of glaze. You want your crust to be completely cool. Like you can pick the pan up and it doesn't feel hot anymore. If it hasn't cooled completely, then when we do this drizzle, it's just going to run straight off the top. We want that pie crust to cool down. Then what I do is I mix up our powdered sugar glaze. And this is a cup of powdered sugar, and we're going to do just a couple tablespoons of cream in it. You don't need very much, just 2. And then use your fork and whisk it together, because we want this to be very thin, but no lumps. We don't want to have any powdered sugar chunks in it because we're going to drizzle this over the top. This is the thing that Parker and Aaron, they're like, oh, you got to do the glaze because it literally makes it like a Pop-Tart. So I use my fork and I just whisk until the glaze is very smooth, and then we're going to just do whatever design you want, but it is easiest if you use a fork because it allows the glaze to drip off of those tines, and you can get a really beautiful design as you drizzle it over your pie. This amount of glaze is a little bit more than we need for this one slab pie, but if my slab pie had been all the way out to the edge of the pan, I probably would have used all of it. So just know that if you do a cup of powdered sugar, it will cover an entire sheet pan. But I just saved this, and we actually drizzled this over our galette as well. I hope you have the best time making your own slab pie. You can fill it with any fruit you have, whether it's apples or peaches, plums, cherries, blackberries, blueberries. You get to choose how you want to fill it. It's so delicious when you can mix it up with different fruits. And yes, everybody wants to eat it for breakfast. And so I'm glad I snagged a little video before they took the last final slice.
The trick to storing your pie is don't cover it, especially with plastic wrap, because it traps all the moisture in there and it makes your pie crust get a little bit soggy. So usually what I do is I'll just like put a piece of parchment over it, or like put another baking sheet upside down on top, and that's how I will store it if there's any left over. But this is summertime pie season.
This is what it's like once it's all cooled. You can just pick it up. It is so fun to serve it this way. Just make sure that you bake it and allow it to cool for a couple hours before you put that glaze on. And then you want it to be cooled anyways before your guests arrive, because you want to be able to cut it like this and serve it, and people can just pick up a slice when they're ready to have dessert. So when you make it the day of your event or dinner or celebration, make it maybe around lunchtime so that it has time to cool and you're ready to serve it when it's dinner time. We look forward to filling our table with you again soon. Come and bake with us. Leave your questions below. We love hearing all about the baking adventures you're having too.